We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Cash Flow Pro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I'm here today with Kent Ritter of Hudson Investing, CEO of Hudson Investing. Kent, how are you today?
Hey, Casey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. We're glad to have you here. And I know we were talking pre-show about a couple deals that you all just took down here recently. And we're kind of excited to dive in and hear about those and hear about some other experience that you've got. And hopefully the listeners can get some of their questions answered when it comes to how some of these deals get structured, how some of these deals get taken down, and how some of them get funded and so on. So why don't you kind of start the conversation with a little bit about yourself and where you came from, and then we'll kind of turn it towards how you got involved in real estate and capital raising.
Yeah, for sure. So, grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. Live in Indianapolis now. And that's where we do a lot of our deals, and then throughout the Midwest. Went to IU, studied finance and econ. Then I spent about 12 years as a management consultant. And as a management consultant, what I did was I flew around the country helping businesses solve problems that they couldn't solve themselves. And in that time, as a management consultant, actually started my own consulting firm with several partners. Grew that small business from literally just 5 guys around a kitchen table to 95 employees and doing about 30 million in annual revenue. And decided to sell that at the end of 2015. And I say all that because I think that was really the launching pad for my real estate career. I mean, one, just being able to take my project management experience, working with clients over 12 years, but also my experience in running, a small business that became a not so small business. And,
Yeah.
and then really real estate for me at the beginning was about diversifying my investments, having this capital from the exit of that company and wanting to make sure that I wasn't just putting all my eggs in one basket. I think most people, when they think about investments, they think about stocks and bonds, mutual funds, but it kind of stops there.
Yep.
But I knew that I didn't want to just throw all this money in the stock market and just kind of hope and pray that things worked out. So I was looking for other types of investments. Through a bunch of research, landed on real estate. And then it took me a while to really find my niche within real estate. I sold houses on contract, and built up a note portfolio. I did some fix and flips. I built out a portfolio of about 11 single families and duplexes. And none of those really, for a number of reasons, those strategies didn't really fit where I wanted to go long term. It just took me a while to kind of find my way. It really wasn't until I learned about multifamily and really larger multifamily that I knew that was the type of asset that I thought really had potential to be a great investment. And then really learning about syndication and this idea of pooling money together to be able to go buy something bigger and better than you can yourself. Which again, allows you to not put all your eggs in one basket, right? Spread your money across different properties. That was really when the light bulb went off for me of like, wow, this is the right way to be doing this. And I started out investing with others in syndications, started out as a limited partner, and really used that to understand the process and to start building capital and building some cash flow. And then in 2019, I decided that, I had learned enough and read enough and found some mentors and went through some programs and decided that, when I'm sitting in the conferences that like, man, I know all this stuff they're talking about. And I think I really understand this. And so decided to partner with a couple of guys and go out and buy 250 units in Atlanta as our first deal. And we syndicated it and in the fall of 2019. And then really we've been growing the business and kind of rinse and repeating that process ever since.
Man, that's great. And and it's the same for myself, and I know a lot of other people when that light just goes ding, and it's just like, wait, like you said, I was in the same boat doing the things completely like so almost from a fragmented standpoint, especially when you're in the single family and you're in the fix and flip and you're in the selling on contract and stuff like that. It's like it didn't take anything to make 10 or 20,000
Hmm.
dollars. I mean, that was like just the usual. And till you start realizing that making 10, 20, $30,000 a hit is not like that's not like life changing generational kind of stuff. This stuff right here, when you start stepping in and you start really discovering multifamily, and then especially how to couple capital raising with multifamily to leverage your own abilities, man, it really changes things, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is scalable, right? And I think that's critical. I think anybody that's been through that single family process knows how difficult it can be to, acquire houses, find good deals, and then you start to really do the math on how many houses you have to buy to really create, like you said, a life changing, even first revenue stream, but then a portfolio that's really going to impact, like you said, generational wealth and create something for your family and generations to come. I mean, it's just a hell of a lot of houses, and you start to understand how difficult that is
Yeah.
and how much work that is. I mean,
Well, and then like you said, selling on contract though, and then before you know it, now you're in the what was that guy on A&E, uh, the guy who'd go out and repo cars and stuff. Now you're out chasing money
mhm.
when you really could be chasing other kinds of money from investors instead of chasing down people that owe you money.
Yeah, and so there's really in those strategies, you are kind of the person wearing all the hats. It's difficult, again, without the scale, to be
That's
able to
right.
build out a team. So I think one thing that multifamily really has allowed me to do is really scale up to a point where I can build out a team, uh, to take a lot of these day-to-day tasks. Allows me to stay, focused on my higher level, kind of my highest and best use. And so I think for a lot of
Sure.
reasons, multifamily makes sense. I think syndication makes sense. I think both from an investor standpoint and as an operator, it's just a safer business model. There's more diversification. There's, like, if you have a single family home and you lose your tenant, well, you're stuck paying the mortgage. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
or you have one thing go wrong and it can wipe out 2 years worth of profits. And on an
Yep.
apartment building, just because of the scale, again, on most of our properties, well, all of our properties, we could drop occupancy anywhere from about 65 down to like 65 to 75%, which would be, a 25 to like 35% drop in occupancy, and still pay our mortgage, right?
That's
And still be able to, like I say,
yeah.
live to fight another day. Like if things went wrong, things would have to go so wrong, for us to be able to, to actually default on that mortgage. And with real estate, as long as you can pay your mortgage, I mean, for the most part, you can keep the property and let market forces work for you. Because over time, real estate, I mean, it's always appreciated, and it's not going to stop. I mean, we have ups and downs and there's cycles, but over the long term, property values are continuing to increase.
That's right. That's right. Because everything else, as inflation increases, the cost of living increases, and those cost of living increases in real estate is really the only spot where you can actually profit from those cost of living increases based on, especially if you have assets that you've owned
Hmm.
beforehand. You know what I'm saying? Because then when as the cost of living goes up, your rents go up, and your cost isn't necessarily changing. Now some of your costs that your floating costs or whatever could change, but for the most part, everything's going to just about stay the same. So um, well, let's talk a little bit about so now we've got kind of where you came from and how you got involved in real estate, and at least the looks of what your experience is. But let's talk a little bit about the capital raising side. How did you obviously some people have a hard time finding those first investors or taking down their first deal. Now, obviously, if you sold or if you were, making a career change and you had sold out of one and kind of were coming into another with a pretty good chunk of money to get started, that you probably had people around you that that could potentially have been looking for investments. So maybe you started with a 506B or something like that. But how did that look, and how did your first capital raise stuff start to look?
Yeah. So, I think that capital raising is difficult. I think people usually underestimate how difficult it can be. I
Hmm.
sure did when I started. I mean, absolutely. I that first deal that we did, I partnered with a couple other folks that are more experienced than I am. I think that's a great way to get started. In anything is to learn from others, who have done it before. And so but one of my jobs on that deal was to go out and raise some capital. And I can tell you, I mean, my first time going out raising capital, I only raised half as much as my goal of what I thought I was going to be able to raise. And really, it's because no matter, you may have a lot of friends, like your first investors are really going to be your friends and family, and it's going to be people that are investing in you because they trust you, right? And they love you and they know you. Um, but even in that group, what I underestimated was the fact that you really have to work hard to change people's perceptions of who you are, because they know you through a certain lens, right? They know you as the
Yep.
guy that they went to high school with, or their fraternity brother in college, or their coworker, or even their boss, or their employee,
Yep.
right? But they don't know you as this real estate expert that they're going to trust with, a considerable sum of money, 50,000 plus, and going to trust
Yep.
that you're going to take that money and you're going to get a return, right? And so I think that that's where a lot of people, I think, fall short in really working hard to change people's perception of who they are, and to be viewed as this real estate expert that people can trust, and be viewed in a trustworthy way that they're actually going to give you a significant sum of money. I think it's very different. Um, I've had people come, and want to partner with me, and want to raise capital. And they say, oh, yeah, I know I've got this huge network. I can raise all this capital. And they go out and try it, and kind of fall flat on their face. And I think it's because even if your network is large and there, and you may have high net worth folks in your network, again, it's how do they see you? If they see you as somebody, a friend or whoever, it's very different than that person they're going to trust to give 50, 100, 150, whatever, $1,000 to.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I ran into, and I'm sure much the same as many other folks run into, but I don't even think that those people are necessarily as concerned about their return as they are getting their original investment back. Like, man, here's 50,000. Okay, and what's really the $4,000 that they're going to make over the next year at an 8% pref? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's $4,000. But what I'm getting at is I think some of those people are even like, all right, man, I'm giving you this 50, and if 50 is a lot, like if 50, you obviously accredited investors, maybe 50 not, could not be severely life changing if they lost it. But what I'm getting at is they're like, okay, I'm going to give you this 50 to invest. I want this 50 back. Whatever else we get, hey, that's cool, but we want this 50 back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think smart investors are first concerned about the downside. What's the
Yeah.
downside risk, and then from there, it's yeah, well, what's the potential upside? But I mean, a lot of that is, I mean, that upside is all based on assumptions, right? It's educated guesses. But I think it absolutely should start with what's the downside risk, and what's the likelihood that um, this thing doesn't go well, and what happens, what are those plan B's and C's and D's, and what do those different scenarios look like? I mean, I think smart investors, those are the first questions that they're asking, rather than being so focused on that kind of shiny number on the upside, like that IRR or whatever
Right.
metric they're using to judge success, right? I think first
Yep.
it's about capital preservation and making sure that um, you've got an investment that's going to do well, even in
Well,
a
and just
downturn.
like exactly what you just said, smart investors, and I've oftentimes said that me telling a potential investor the potential downsides is just as important as me telling the investors how much we hope to make, right? Because the smart investor knows that, hey, there's a chance, and he's going to say, okay, hey, is this guy, is he aware of this? Because if he's talking about all this upside and has never even acknowledged that hey, this thing does go south, I mean, then they start to question, okay, if he's not even acknowledging that it could potentially go south, what am I missing here? So I think talking about downside is just as important as talking about upside, um, and letting people make an educated decision from there, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that you've got to have a balanced. I think as a capital raiser, you need to have a balanced approach. I think you need to be realistic about both sides, and I think me as an investor who I mean I invest with others. I've been investing with others for about 7 years now. I still do passive investing. A lot of my focus is on, yeah, what are those downside protections, right? What's your debt service coverage ratio? How what's your
Yeah,
how much cash do we have? What do reserves look like? What do contingencies look like? What are your assumptions, and how realistic are those assumptions, right? Um, and
yeah,
always just judging those different pieces. I think those are great questions to be asking. And I think our job as the deal sponsors is to try to answer as many of those questions up front, um, that we can, and just be transparent. I mean, I think you've got to lead with transparency and let people make their own decision versus trying to sugarcoat something. I think you never want to be in a situation where you are only selling the upside. You're going to end up with investors that are, um, just don't have the full picture, and you're going to be over promising and under delivering. I think that's never a situation where you want to
that's
be.
right. That's exactly right. Overpromising and under delivering. That's to me, I think that's the biggest mistake people make when they go in. And I know from the real estate sales standpoint, which again is the world that I come from, a lot of times new people that come in have that same issue. They're talking about, well, they don't know how to answer the questions about what's the plan if things don't quite work out. If we don't sell the house and get 87 offers on the first day, what's the plan going forward from there? And until you really kind of verbally express that plan and tell them, hey, these are the things we can do next, then I think you kind of always will drag behind. But so what about your first deal was the biggest challenge? If you were to look at just the first deal that you went into and raised cap, like you went and put the property under contract, did the underwriting, determined how much capital you needed to raise, you and your partner. Um, what was the biggest challenge about the very, very first deal that you did?
Um, let's see. That's a good question about the first deal. So it would have been a um, 30 unit built in 2010, down in Louisville, and
You said Louisville, right? Too. I'm impressed. I love that. I hardly ever run across
well,
people
it's
that.
only 2 hours away from us up
Sorry,
here in Indiana, and my wife's family's from Louisville, so I better get it right.
I've only met like two Hoosiers in my whole life that knew how to say Louisville right. I
Well,
just throwing that out
glad
there.
I'm glad I
So, and you're
passed the
one of them.
test.
So I've only
Yeah.
met
So getting back to the
one.
property, I think the biggest challenge on that one, it wasn't raising the capital. I think it was, I think the biggest challenges came more in the operations of the property once we had it closed, and just
Sure.
making sure that we could manage that property remotely. We had, I remember one particular issue we had come up with some water leaks where,
Yeah.
in Louisville you get your water bill every other month, and so you can go quite a while without really knowing something's going wrong. And we had a water bill come back, and I think it was about 3x what we expected it to be, and we knew we had an issue, didn't really know how to solve it though, and so we had to go
Wow.
through just go through the process, get that figured out. We learned a lot about leak detection and prevention and how to work through that. But that was probably one of the biggest issues. So, I think that is something that people should think about. Like, I think that there's so much focus on getting just acquiring a property. Like a lot of the content I see out there is all about how do you acquire and how do you raise capital. Way
Yeah.
less content about how do you actually run a property in the right way, which is so much more of it. I mean, you think about if it's a 5-year hold, the first 2 months is the acquisition and the capital raising. The next 5 years is actually running the property and making sure that you are
Yep.
realizing the business plan and all the promises that you've made up to that point. Right. And so that's just much more of the process is actually being a good operator.
And property management in and of itself is so encumbering, or can be encumbering on your mental state more or less than it is your time or your effort. I mean, when you start running through different scenarios and things in your mind, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you've got 10 things to do, well then the next day that 10 things is now turned into 20. I mean, if you're not prepared for that, if you're not prepared for the operation side, man, it can really be a strain. I know that firsthand. I mean, if especially if you've got other things, and you get this first one, and once you get it kind of worked out and get your business plan implemented and start moving up, but then, man, I mean, I don't know. I just is that have you kind of ran, just like you said, your leak stuff? I mean, that can be just that could just drive you bonkers, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think real estate is all about solving problems, right? I mean, it's not that nothing bad is it's not if something bad's going to happen, it's when, right? And I think it's all just about
Hmm.
solving problems, being creative, being proactive, and the more that you learn, the more that you do this, the more you can anticipate those things. I mean, the more that we build cushion into our model, the more that we add reserves for particular items. Even if like if we're buying a property and we know that the roofs have maybe a 5-year life on them, right? They don't have to be replaced at this point, but we're still going to reserve some dollars just for the event that we may have to replace a roof. So just putting away
Sure.
money. I think making sure your deal is well capitalized, making sure your deal has enough cash in it, making sure you've got extra reserves and contingencies to weather those unexpected things. I mean, I think that's really how you build safety into your deal and save yourself a lot of
Yep.
stress. Um, and save
That can really ease up the mental pressure
Yeah,
for
and save
sure.
yourself from having to do a capital call, which is really a black eye on any deal. If you have to go back to the investors and say, hey, this came up, we didn't anticipate it, we've got to get some more money. I mean, I've been on the other side of those situations being an investor, and you're always kind of wondering, like, well, am I throwing good money after bad?
Yep.
And so that's never a situation that you want to be in. I think the way you avoid that is by just being conservative in your assumptions and putting extra cash into your deal as cushions.
Sure. Sure. Now let's talk about as the you kind of got settled in with this new career, and the fact that you're now a multifamily syndicator,
Mm-hmm.
basically. What was on the second deal was that I've I've oftentimes heard, well, I've heard basically every podcaster and every capital raiser and every syndicator say that the degree of difficulty between deal one and deal two is like goes down by like 50%, because now um, you feel like maybe you're a little more versed on what questions to ask potential investors, as well as what questions to ask potential property um, when you're looking for deals and so on and so forth, and broker relationships. So did you find that to hold true as far as the difference between deal one and deal two?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're getting up into like our mid-teens now, a number of deals. So it's hard. It's kind of harder for me to remember the specifics between the first
To
couple,
go
but
back, yeah.
but absolutely, there's a learning curve with everything, right? And I think especially when you're when you're buying larger multifamily, it's a pretty steep learning curve. So that first one,
Yep.
absolutely. I mean, you're going to have your most lessons learned, and then hopefully you're being smart about it and you're documenting things and you're, making mental notes and you're learning each time you go through the process, right? I mean, every time we go through the process, we're learning and we're improving, and you just improve through reps, right? Just as if you were working out.
Yep.
I mean, each rep, you're going to get a little bit better on. And I think that's what it's about, just being nimble and updating your process and always improving. And that's really how we look at it. I mean, every time we close an acquisition, we sit down and say, okay, what went well? Well, what didn't go well? Well, how do we do it better next time? Right? How do we add to our due diligence list? How do we make sure we get ahead of this thing? How do we make sure that we're staying on top of the title company and not letting them delay things and getting behind, right? Well, who's going to do that? Okay, well, this is your job now, and this is going into our policy and our procedure. And so I think it's always improving. So yeah, I think your first one's always going to be your most difficult. I mean, I think that's everything in life, right? The first time you do anything, it's the most difficult. And then as you go on, things get easier because you've learned those lessons.
Are you all at a point now where your repeat investor business is pretty much? Are you all going out and actively searching out and finding new
Well,
investors?
both. I think you're always building your network, right? But we have a we
Sure.
have a great
Yeah.
group of repeat investors that we can rely on to know that, okay, in any deal we know we kind of have this much that's pretty much locked in. These folks invest every time, and that there's some good comfort in that. But as we continue to grow
Yeah.
or the deal sizes continue to get larger, or maybe we switch and we're going after a nicer asset. It's a higher cost per door, and you just have, as you do that, your capital needs increase. So not only do you
Yep.
continue to build your network, but you continue, as you evolve, find new sources of capital. Like JV partners, private equity firms, crowdfunding sources. Different ways to diversify, just to have more sources of capital. And because just like it's just like on the debt side, there's so many different kinds of loans that you can do, and I'm of the opinion that none are good or bad. They're different tools in the tool belt. It's the same thing on the equity side. You
Yep.
gotta know what's the right tool for the right job. You don't bring a hammer if you need a screwdriver, and you really just have to be knowledgeable, I think, in the different sources and different types of sources, and have an abundance of each, so you can put the right tools together, to get the project done.
Awesome. Yeah, man. And that's the different tools in the tool belt. That's probably the best way to put that, as far as like, especially when you start looking for different ways to get things done. And I, like my grandfather used to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? Just because your way is different doesn't mean it's wrong or indifferent. But hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the Cash Flow Pro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making Cash Flow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show. So and you said obviously your repeat investors. I've heard several capital raisers and several syndicators say that the repeat investors is kind of what gives them the fuel to, like you said, it gives them the comfort to know they can go out and strike a deal on a piece of property, knowing that they've got X amount of investors that likely will
Mm-hmm.
come in, and then go from there. And I know that you and I talked a little bit about these last couple deals that you did. I think you said you closed the first week of
Yep.
July, right? And I believe you said one in Cincinnati and one in, was it Sandusky, or where was it at?
Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, that's right. All right. So on those deals, being the last, the ones that the last few that you've
Mm-hmm.
done, and we were talking about, because I know so many people, like I said, they have a deal, they have the ability or the contacts enough to raise some capital, but $10 million purchase price. They can raise 2 million in capital. They have the deal. The deal's worth 15 million. Where do they go to get the other 8? And I know that maybe on these last 2 deals, you said you and your partner and you all were kind of the key sponsors or whatever you wanted to call it. But where have you gone in the past to get that balance in the middle?
So sorry, say that again. So you're saying you've got like a $10 million deal and you've
You've
got
got a
two
ten
million in
million dollar.
equity.
You've got $10 million purchase
Mm-hmm.
price. You have the ability or the commitments to raise the 2 million in equity, or the 20% or 25, 2.5 million
Uh-huh.
in equity, leaving you a balance of $7.5 million. And you need, where have you gone in the past to get that key sponsor, that key partner, that that person, or has it always been you and your partner that have signed on the notes to say, hey, we'll stand good for these? What How did that work, and especially maybe even in the beginning?
Yeah. So if I'm understanding you right, I mean, I think that's the debt portion of the deal, right? So
Correct.
you're gonna go out and you're
Correct.
gonna get
Yeah.
debt on the property. I mean, typically we're leveraging 65 to 75% of the capital stack for the property is going to be debt, right? It's going to be your mortgage, and then you're going to bring 25 to 35% of the deal in equity. And so
Correct.
we've gone to a number of sources to get that debt. I mean, whether it's agency financing with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, from a fixed debt standpoint, I mean, they have some really good options and good terms typically. And it's one thing that sets multifamily apart is having those government agencies that are there to, um,
Yes. Very
to
much
lend
so.
and just provide you another option. Other than that, we've worked with several local banks, community banks in the markets that we've been in. And as of late, we've done several bridge loans with more of a regional partner here in town, and through their debt fund. And so we've used a lot of different options. It kind of goes back to that tools in the tool belt, right? You got to put the
Yep.
right tool to the right job based on your hold horizon, based on how much leverage you need, based on how much value add work needs to be done, right? Um,
And those debt contacts, those debt the banker contacts and stuff, I feel like take such a back seat, I think, in the whole initial building process. I think those contacts takes even behind the back seat, like they almost take a trunk
mhm.
seat when you're networking and you're trying to figure out, because everybody's so focused on the capital raising side that they forget that, hey, I'm going to have to go out and borrow 80% or 70% or whatever
Yeah.
it is of the purchase price of that asset. And I better have some good contacts to get that done, so that, or at least a contact that understands what I'm doing, and knows that, hey, this is going to end up being okay. So, all right. Well, listen, hey, Kent, we're running out of time here, but we have a couple of questions that we ask every guest that comes on the show, and they're just a couple of nuanced questions that you can answer with whatever. There's no right or wrong answer, I
Okay.
guess. The first question is, excuse me, what is the best book that you have either recently read or are currently reading?
That's a really good question. Currently reading. Oh, I got it sitting around here. There's, I kind of go, I ebb and flow between real estate books and entrepreneurship books, business books, and then personal development books as well. I've lately been on more of like a personal development kick, and so the book I'm reading now is called The Way of the Superior Man, and it's just a
Okay.
really interesting take on I mean, just how to live it. Like I said, as a superior man, how to live life as a man, and how to kind of balance your relationship, and how to, um, kind of meet your goals and the differences between men and women and how they relate. And there's just some really good insights in there. So that's the one I've been reading. I've been enjoying that book.
Sure. Awesome. All right. Next question. What is a dream vacation that you have either taken or hope to take?
Man, that's easy right now. I actually just got back 2 days ago. We were in the Bahamas for 7 days, and that was an incredible vacation.
Really?
Yep, did some, flew to some different islands, chartered a boat, just hopped all around, spent some good time at the beach. So that was a well-deserved rest after closing those two projects the first week of July.
Yeah, I'm sure, man. Because especially if you were doing two at one time, man, I tell you that could really separate, like the old saying goes, separate the men from the boys real quick. Two deals at one time. So, all right, well, good. Well, listen, how can the listeners, if they heard something that resonated with them, or they want to reach out and maybe learn more about you or Hudson Investing or whatever, something, maybe they just heard something they want clarification on or want to learn more about you, what is the best way for a listener to reach out and get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way is to go to kentritter.com. That's really my home base. You can check out my own podcast. It's called Ritter on Real Estate. We've got a weekly blog we put up there all about multifamily and commercial real estate. A lot of other videos and resources, some new investor content for folks who are trying to understand multifamily investing and syndications and learn the terminology and just some frequently asked questions to help people kind of get over that first hump. So go to kentritter.com. And if you're interested in investing, you can also sign up to be an investor and get on our list there.
Awesome. Good deal. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for being with us today and taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us. And listeners, as always, please head down and leave us a 5-star review and also type a review so that others may know what you liked about the Cash Flow Pro podcast. And as always, please smash that subscribe button with your finger, your elbow, your ear, your eye, however it is. Smash that subscribe button so that you can be notified when we release new episodes. And I want to thank everybody for listening today. And Kent, again, thank you for being with us. I really enjoyed the discussion, and I feel like it was really going to be really beneficial to the listeners to hear it. So thanks again.
Sure, Casey. Thanks for having me on.
Cash Flow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.